Spartacus left the city and with his caravan, and as he went along the road, those shadows and large stones and narrow roads began to get to him. And he started to get this feeling that, yeah, I'm a sitting duck out here. And he was a Roman. He was wise enough to leave most of his fancy garb at home, but he had, Romans had their own haircut. If you were in the bureaucracy or in the upper crust of Roman society, you could be identified 100 feet away because of your haircut. And he also had the manicured look of his hands as well as his feet, Roman rings, Roman jewels, and as well as Roman wear. Is usually silk rather than linen or cotton or wool. And so it was obvious that even without broadcasting it, without a driver's license or identification, he was Roman. He could be easily identified as that. But he didn't have any of this, anything that would confirm that because of fear of other people along the way that he may meet. And so he became very frightened of what may happen, that they are still robbers out there. And so he became so concerned about it that he stopped. And he hid all of the tax receipts in a cave along the road. And after he finished, then he went on his way with the caravan route, or with the caravan in tow. Certainly didn't have any money with him, but it looked like that he was just a typical merchant. And sure enough, not long after he had hid the money, he was attacked by robbers, and these were just the typical highwayman thugs. And he didn't have any money, but they stole the camels. They stole the donkeys and the mules, all the animals. They stole anything of any value in that regard. And then they took his jewelry. They took his silk clothing and beat him up and left him for dead, and probably for no other reason except for the fact that he didn't have any money. And also perhaps they beat him up and left him for dead because he is obviously a Roman. And there was no love lost between the Romans in authority and anyone else. Now, Jericho was from the place where he was beaten up and attacked until the city of Jericho was about 14 miles. Jericho was a very wealthy city, very, very wealthy. It's also the very first city in the world that had a public hospital. And if you got sick in Jerusalem, in Damascus, in Capernaum, in Caesarea Maritima, in Joppa, then you were taken to the hospital in Jericho. And it was there that not only did they have a hospital, but they also had inns. They called medical inns, that you could rent a room and stay in that room as long as you were being treated at the hospital. And so it was it was known for that, and money came in by the millions of dollars into Jericho, not only because of the hospital, but because it was the playground of the rich and famous of Rome. If you were anybody, you had a mansion in Jericho. And so the Spartacus was laying there beaten, dying, and along came a Jewish priest. Now, under the law of Ezra for priests, A priest was obligated to stop and help anyone, especially the stranger, and especially the stranger that was physically hurt or physically being beaten and was dying. They had no choice. This is Ezra's command through the mouth of God, as they say, which was mandatory for a Jewish priest to do so. But this man, his name was Eleazar, the real name, real guy. As he looked at this man laying there, obviously, he was a Roman. And Ezra wasn't talking about Romans when he made this declaration. Pretty obvious he wasn't talking about Romans. So I'm under no obligation to help this Roman. And he walked on the other side and went his way. Now, a little bit later on, there was another man coming up from Jericho to go into Jerusalem. He was a Levite. And the Levite had their instructions all the way back from the time of Moses, the law of Moses. And the law of Moses concerning Levites says, you help anybody who is in need. If there is a need, whether it be your friend or your enemy or someone you don't even know, you stop to the point of giving them your own raiment or your own animal or your own funds for their benefit. But as Joachim, that was his name, as he looked at this man laying on the ground, it was really obvious that Moses wasn't talking about Romans. Satan's servants. Men who enslave us, who care nothing about us, and who tax us almost out of existence. So, no, I'm sorry, I can't help you. There was a man by the name of Narcissus. Narcissus lived in Magdala. Magdala was in the region of Samaria. Narcissus was a former very rich man. His father was Samaritan. His mother was Greek. And he owned a silk forwarding company. He would bring silk in from China, from Nepal, from India, and he would bring it in and then resell it to Rome and to the Roman bureaucracy, Roman upper crust, and even or anyone who could buy it. But the Romans had begun to tax him mercilessly, taxing and taxing and taxing to the point that he was just about bankrupt, just about ruined. Well, he had made an appointment. So he had requested an appointment and had been granted an appointment with the minister of taxation, Spartacus. And he was going to appeal his case. Only Spartacus could reduce the tax load. Only Spartacus could give him an extension on paying his taxes. And only Spartacus could make any appeal a reality. So he had given the date at which he was allowed to come. And so Narcissus had left Magdala, had spent the night in Jericho, and now was on his way to Jerusalem to meet with the minister of taxation. Now, this Narcissus had never met the minister of taxation. He didn't know what he looked like. And he especially didn't know that the man that he was going to have an appointment with was laying in the ditch, dying. The man who had been beaten. Narcisse was traveling to Jericho to go to his appointment, to meet the man who could make a difference. Then he saw this guy on the road who was beaten, dying, maybe even closer to death than life. Obviously, he was a Roman, and I certainly have no love lost for Romans. And said, besides, if I stop and help this man, I will miss my appointment. And if I miss my appointment, I may not ever get another appointment, and my business will be ruined. And I'll be out of business. And so he was debating what to do, but his conscience overruled his caution. And he stopped, knowing full well that if he helped this man that he didn't know, was a member of his enemy class, that he may be ruined for life. But he stopped and he helped anyway. He dressed the wounds and even backtracked all the way back to Jericho. Checked him into the hospital, checked him into one of the inns there that housed the patients, and then told them that I'll pay for it when I get back. And if he's whatever the bill is, I'll pay for it. After getting that arranged, he went as fast as he could back to Jerusalem. But when he got there, obviously, there was no Spartacus. And as he appealed, he said, can I make another appointment? I'm sorry, only the Minister of Taxation can make the appointments. Well, I had an appointment and I just missed it because I had these other obligations. I'm sorry. We only do what we can do, and the minister is the one who makes these decisions. Well, can I just make arrangements to maybe pay you a little bit today? And then when I make another appointment with him, we can settle up the difference. No, you can't do that because only the minister will take care of that. Well, when will he be back? I don't know. He has his own schedule, but he will return. Well, can I make an arrangement? Can I make an appointment through you to be with him? No. He makes that himself only. But you don't understand. If I don't talk to him, I'll go bankrupt. And if I don't get some type of relief that only he can give, then I'll be ruined for my life. I'm sorry, sir, but that's something that you and he have to work out whenever you can. Narcisse left Jerusalem very, very down, to say the least. He stopped by Jericho, paid a bill, and went on back to his home in Magdala. Narcisse never found out that the man he helped was the minister of taxation, Spartacus. And Spartacus never told him who he was. Over the next number of months, he continued to help him. Spartacus stayed in the hospital in Jericho for more than 1 year. And throughout that entire year, Narcisse paid the bill, even though he couldn't afford it. All of his merchandise, all of his things, that his spools of silk were confiscated to pay the pay the tax load. He was never able to make another appointment. His business suffered tremendously until finally he had to appeal to the governor, to Caesarea Maritima, for bankruptcy. And only the governor could grant bankruptcy. So he knew that he was ruined. He knew that bankruptcy was the only next step that could be taken. Finally, Spartacus was ready to leave. He was better, very well by then. Narcissus came down to pay the final bill. Spartacus says, I want you to go with me to my home. Of course, all of the upper echelon of Rome lived in Caesarea Maritima. I mean, that was a Roman town. That was the rodeo drive of the Romans. And so everybody who was anybody and all of the upper level of Roman society lived in Caesarea Maritima. And so there was no question that when Spartacus told him that he lived in Caesarea Maritima, that wasn't okay. Well, that was no news. That was just typical. And so, no, I can't go with you. First of all, I can't afford it. And second of all, I have to do my final prep for a sell-off of my business and bankruptcy and so forth, and I really can't. And finally, Spartacus talked him into going with him. So Spartacus and Narcissus went to Caesarea Maritima, and there he was accompanied him to make sure he made it okay to his house. As they entered through the front gates of the city, Spartacus stopped and he says, I have some news that I must share with you. He said, I am Marcus Antonius Spartacus. I am the minister of taxation that you had an appointment with. I am the one who could have made a difference in your life. Narcissus stood there dumbfounded. And just as he was about ready to talk, Valerius Gratius, the governor of the Roman governor of Judea, met them. And Spartacus says, oh, and by the way, here's my uncle, the governor of Rome. And the governor of Rome, Gratius, looked at his man, and first of all, he thanked him for caring for his nephew and for taking care of him all those years. And then he said this, he says, in my hand is your request for bankruptcy. He took it and ripped it in half. And he says, no longer will you have to declare bankruptcy because your bankruptcy has been forfeited and neutralized. He said, not only that, from this day forward, all of your tax liability has been satisfied. And from this very day, you or your ancestors, or your successors, and anyone associated with you from this time forward will never have to pay taxes to Rome again. Never. And not only that, I pledge from this day forward that the royal household of Rome will from this day on buy our silk exclusively from you. Obviously, Narcisse had to pick himself up off the floor. He eventually moved to Tarshish, which present-day Tel Aviv. When you go on tours of Israel, you can go and see where his shop was, where his home was. He became multi-zillionaire, if there's such a name as that. But not only did the Romans abide by their agreement year after year after year, but when the Persians took over, the Persians honored it too. And then when the Turks took over, the Turks honored it. And then when the Crusaders took over, the Crusaders honored it. And it was honored all the way up even into when the British were occupying that region. And it became the leading wholesaler and retailer and supplier of silk in the entire Middle East. And finally, when the last successor of the family died, is when the company went out of business and they continued no more. The year was 1817. Narcisse stopped and helped his enemy with no guarantees of even a thank you. You will reap what you sow. And Narcisse and his family reaped the benefits for an additional 1,800 years. And it became the greatest example of God meeting the needs of a person just by doing one thing that's ever told by Jesus in the Word of God. He didn't reap it immediately. He had to declare bankruptcy. He had to sell everything he had. He had to go through the mental anguish of horror and the anguish of knowing I'm ruined. But about a year after the seed was planted, then the reaping began. And the reaping that he qualified for was so much more beyond what he had planted. And it continued to reap and reap and reap and reap. But Narcisse was not the only one who planted a seed that day. Eleazar the priest, he planted a seed. The seed he planted was neglect, bitterness, don't have time for you, you're my enemy. I don't want to have time for you. And there was not an immediate opportunity to reap what was sown that day. But in the year 136 BC, 136 AD, the Romans under Emperor Hadrian says, enough is enough. And Jerusalem was totally destroyed. Not only was it destroyed, but they went there with plows and plowed up the foundations, cut down every tree, and there was nothing, zero, zilch, nothing left. 580,000 people were killed by the Romans at that time. And of those were 38 1,000 priests. And that was the end of the priesthood as they knew it at that time. It's been reestablished in their own modern development since then, but the original priesthood, established by Moses, reestablished by Ezra, came to an end with over 30,000 deaths. That's quite a harvest, isn't it? The Levites, Jericho, he planted a seed that day. It was time for that reaping to take place in 70 AD, when Titus, the general of Rome, laid siege to the city of Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. That great, magnificent temple was destroyed. The Levites were there as major role players within the worship of the temple, or worship in the temple. And that day, at that siege of the temple, 274,000 people died. 180,000 more were enslaved. And 51,000 Levites, to the man, were executed. And the office of the Levites went out of existence, never to rise again. We do reap what we sow. We always reap in a different season than what we sow, and we always reap more than what we sow. The Good Samaritan, the Samaritan who had everything to lose and nothing to gain, chose to plant the good seed. And when he did, then God gave back, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. You know, God doesn't do anything by accident, but he does leave it up to us to try to capitalize upon the opportunities that he gives us. And those opportunities are daily if we just look for them. Thank you so much. The Lord bless you.